Welcome to This Explainer. Today we are diving into that massive, fascinating space between asking life's absolute biggest questions and actually finding their answers. I mean, have you ever really stopped to wonder why we believe the things we do, especially when we can't completely 100% prove them? Or how the simple, everyday act of choosing to get out of bed and live is so intimately tied to both logic and faith? Well, today we're breaking down Tennyson Samraj's incredibly insightful academic paper. He maps out exactly how philosophy and religion aren't actually at war with each other, but rather they form a sort of bridge to human awareness. It's a brilliant framework, and I am super excited to jump right in.
So here is our roadmap for today. First up, we'll challenge the whole idea of freedom from religion. Then we'll weigh questions versus answers, dig into three very distinct forms of awareness, and finally, we'll talk about how we navigate the sheer absurdity of life. All right, let's tackle part one, freedom from religion, and why it might actually be an impossible escape. We really have to start with the ultimate mystery, right? The philosopher Gottfried Leibniz posed this famously profound question: why is there something instead of nothing? We're starting here because this single thought is literally the baseline for all religious and philosophical inquiry. This isn't just a fun little thought experiment to chew on with your morning coffee. It is the fundamental starting block that makes the philosophy of religion absolutely essential. Now, you've probably heard modern new atheist thinkers like Sam Harris and Richard Dawkins powerfully advocate for a complete freedom from religion. They make the case that humanity just needs to untether itself completely from these systems of belief. It's a very prevalent viewpoint today, and the goal there is to firmly separate human progress from any sort of theological framework. But the author offers a really vital counter-argument to that view. While we can, for sure, advocate for freedom of religion, the basic right to choose what you believe, freedom from religion is actually impossible. Why? Because we humans are hopelessly bound to the fundamental questions of existence. As long as we are here, we just can't escape the questions that gave rise to religion in the first place. So you can totally reject a specific set of answers, but you literally cannot be free of the questions themselves. Which brings us right into part two, questions versus answers, and defining the exact playing field of philosophy and religion. This breaks down the Great Divide perfectly. Philosophy is entirely obsessed with whether the questions we ask are relevant. It doesn't even necessarily care if an answer is right or wrong, it just cares if the question itself holds meaning. Religion, on the flip side, is totally focused on claiming whether the answers to those questions are true or false. Religion provides the definitive statements, the veracity, while philosophy is there to constantly challenge, revise, and examine if those statements are actually relevant. So ultimately, these two fields desperately need each other. They're like two sides of the exact same coin. Philosophy without religion is kind of half empty, and religion without philosophy is only half meaningful. They are two distinct subjects, sure, but they deal with the exact same fundamental human condition. Religion focuses on the truth of what we believe, but the philosophy of religion is intensely interested in the truth of why we actually choose to believe it. Okay, part three, the three forms of awareness and how we actually bridge that gap. First step is ontological awareness. This is our deep, profound recognition that we exist right now and that someday, well, we won't. It's that awe-inspiring realization of being and non-being. We just naturally recognize a simple rule: all things that have a beginning must have a cause. Because of that, our ontological awareness practically forces us to look out at the universe and search for an uncaused cause, a creator or some force that doesn't have a beginning and just cannot cease to exist. And that naturally leads us into epistemic awareness. This deals directly with our cognitive self, how we understand truth and falsity. I mean, we all know we can hold beliefs completely independently of knowing the absolute scientific proof of what's being claimed. Epistemic awareness is what actually justifies the decisions we make about why we choose to hold metaphysical beliefs, even when we are completely lacking direct empirical evidence. It's the conscious self stepping up and making a justified belief decision. Finally, we have existential awareness. Get this, establishing absolute truth is actually way less important than understanding what that truth does in the daily life of a believer. All life is about meaning. Existential awareness focuses on the somewhat harsh fact that simply being born is an imposition. None of us asked to be here. But choosing to keep living, that is an active, daily choice. And to make that choice, we really have to deal with the inherent absurdity of existing at all. So, bringing all three of these together, the philosophy of religion isn't just about debating some ancient dogma. It is a comprehensive toolkit.
It helps individuals deeply understand the real-world implications of their own claims. It analyzes the origins of the universe through ontology. It examines the very nature of consciousness through epistemology. And it evaluates the content of our conscience and our morality through existentialism. It's the whole package.
Let's move into part 4, absurdity and choosing life. How do we find meaning in the gritty, everyday reality of survival?
To really drive this home, let's bring in a heavy hitter, the existential philosopher Albert Camus. Now, philosophers aren't exactly known for being lighthearted, and Camus famously argued that suicide is actually the single greatest question humans confront. He pointed out that life is fundamentally absurd. The universe is completely silent, and yet here we are, struggling and striving every single day. Now, this isn't meant to be morbid at all. It's just highlighting that the act of living has to be done in the direct context of this absurdity.
Which leads us to, honestly, the most poignant question of this entire explainer. If the universe is totally silent and life is completely absurd, why do we choose to live? Most people choose to live not just because they can't bring themselves to die, but because they actively choose not to. But what is actually driving that choice?
The source posits a totally fascinating answer here. Life itself isn't necessarily the absurd part. The true absurdity would be choosing to live while having absolutely no idea why you're doing it. Therefore, choosing to believe in something, and that could be God, it could be a moral framework, it could be service to others, that belief is exactly how we ascribe meaning to our survival. Belief in this philosophical framework is literally the cure for absurdity.
Because at the end of the day, finding meaning is a universal human project. Like we said, birth is an imposition, but living is a choice. And since we are only given one moment at a time, we kind of have to make it count. Whether you are a secular humanist finding meaning between the womb and the tomb, or a theist finding meaning by looking at a life beyond this planet, the goal is exactly the same. Everyone is using their existential awareness to cure the absurdity of life and just live authentically. The author concludes the framework with this incredibly unifying thought. A secular mind allows for such diversity of beliefs. There is no place for fundamentalism and dogmatism. This is such a powerful formula for intellectual humility. It's a great reminder that because the gap between what we currently know and what there is to know is so massively immense, nobody has a monopoly on truth. Intellectual honesty and just recognizing our shared human condition are really the only logical paths forward.
As we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with a bit of a provocation to challenge your own awareness today. Ask yourself, are you simply accepting the answers you've been handed, or are you brave enough to really examine the questions that necessitated them in the first place? Understanding why we believe is just as important as what we believe. Thank you so much for joining me on this journey through the philosophy of religion. Until next time, keep asking the big questions.